call the meeting of the June 14th, 2007 Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee to order. I'd like to welcome everyone here. We'll start with introductions across the table. I'm Brittany Montgomery with the town of Clarksville.
I'm Lori Pacino with the City of Mount Washington.
I'm Keenan Stratman with the City of St. Matthews.
Curtis Hockenberry, Mayor of Shepherdsville.
Michelle King, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Emily Lewis, Louisville Metro Planning Design Services.
Brian Dixon, Clark County.
Scott Stewart from Port of Indiana.
Nancy Snow-Tark and Regional Mobility Council.
Jim Urban, Oldham County.
Matt Minier, City of Jeffersontown.
Felicia Harper, Bullitt County Planning and Zoning.
Larry Cheney, Kipta.
Ashley Davidson, Kipta.
Nick Bale, Kipta.
David Burton with Gipton.
I'm Joe Pavoni with GRW.
Andy Rush, Kipta.
Jamie Cash, Strand.
Fairbury, Kipta. Amanda Duffy, Kipta.
John Swintoski, Louisville Metro Parks.
Rob Frazier, HDR.
Carl Sawyer, Integrated Engineering.
Sean Dykes with HDR.
David Lee, HDR.
Ricky Bowles with Tremont.
Hannah Radcliffe, VFW Engineer.
Scott Fleming, City of Shepherdsville.
Arthur Jones, City of Shepherdsville.
Stephen Devitt, Purchase and Eichel. Jeff Schaefer with HDR.
Bradley Coombs with Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Craig Butler with Louisville Metro Pollution Control District.
Bob Stein with United Consulting Engineers. Jason Gardner with OR Coleman.
Dan Ruin with the KYTC.
Judy Nickerson, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Chris Allen, KYTC.
Ron Gibbon, Oracle.
Connie Higdon, KYTC Central Office Planning. Marideli Loisel, KYTC.
We will, first off, we want to introduce some new members, I think the first time from Mount Washington, St. Matthews, and Shepherdsville. Thank you guys for joining us. Have any questions as we go along? We will start by approving the April 12, 2017 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? Are there any questions? Can I have a motion to approve them?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This is the chance for individuals from the public who would like to comment on anything affiliated with the agenda or just items. This is the only chance to comment during the meeting from the public. Is there one here? See none, we'll move on. The next meeting item is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Staff will report. Larry?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. The Policy Committee last met April 27th. We skipped the May meeting as well as the TTCC May meetings. The evaluation process that we're going to use for our next Metropolitan Transportation Plan update was approved by the committee. The SHIFT project selection process, SHIFT being the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet's new process by which they are going to add projects to the new 6-year plan, was also approved by the committee. The committee also approved the fiscal year 2018 Unified Planning Work Program, which is the document that we use in both states to submit for our federal planning funds that we get from those states. And we had some administrative modifications. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Transportation Alternatives Set Aside Program recommendations. Nick?
Yes, thank you. How are you doing today? I'm here to present the Transportation Alternatives Set Aside Program Working Group recommendations. At the end of this presentation, I'll be asking you all to officially make recommendations for the TPC to consider for approval at the June 23rd meeting. So just for a refresher, the Transportation Alternatives Program is basically designed to fund bicycle and pedestrian focused projects, although there are transit projects are eligible, as well as sidewalks, bike lanes, and those sort of things. There's also, I think, some landscaping and historic preservation activities are also eligible. So that's kind of the general focus of the program. In terms of timing, back in February, the TPC approved minor changes to the application, as well as selection criteria. On the 3rd of March, KIPTA announced the notice of funding availability, providing application materials and whatnot to any eligible entities. On the 14th, applications from LPAs were due, and on June 5th, the working group finalized its recommendations. Both the list of projects that were submitted and the recommendations were in the mail out, so you guys should have that in your packet if you haven't already looked through that. So today, again, I'm asking for you guys to consider these recommendations and either accept them, modify them, but essentially recommend something for the TPC to approve in a week. So on the Indiana side of things, we really just received 2 projects. The Jeffersonville and Clarksville both teamed up to submit a joint application for the 9th Street Montgomery Avenue corridor. The plan is to design and construct a multimodal connection between the 2 cities and the arts districts in particular. Design will provide new sidewalks, a bike lane, lighting, and other aesthetic amenities. You can see they requested $231,317 in both fiscal years 19 and 20. The other project that was submitted was from TARC. It's for improvements to the bus stops around the Jeffersonville High School. One side of the road, they'd be adding a shelter, a concrete boarding path, and lighting, and the other side, it would just be trash receptacles, a bench. And so, ultimately, after reviewing those 2 projects, the working group, the average score ended up that the top-ranked project was the Jefferson-Clarksville. And so the recommendation for the Indiana side of the river is to award $231,317 for PE in 2019, and the same amount, which is our full apportionment basically, or allocation, the same amount in 2020 for construction. So that is essentially, we've got 2 projects. We only have enough funding for one of them. So that's the working group's recommendations in Indiana. With that recommendation, that would leave $0 in the Transportation Alternatives Program, at least based on the funding that we know now, estimating out 3 years. That would leave us without funding until 2021. On the other side of the river in Kentucky, we received 6 projects, so a little more competitive. There were probably, I think the total requests for funding were about $1 million more than we had available. After evaluating the projects, the working group determined that the highest ranked project was the Park Place Mall Transit Node. The project basically involves the construction of a pedestrian plaza around that Dixie Highway location with a new canopy shelter, communal seating, bicycle storage, lockers, solar lighting, and landscaping. And the working group is recommending fully funding the construction phase of that project in 2018 for an amount of $123,200. The second highest rated project was Jeffersontown's Patty Lane Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Improvement Project. Here, the basic idea is to construct safety and access management improvements, including sidewalks on both sides, sharrows to guide bicyclists, drainage improvements, as well as I think reconfiguring some of the curb cuts. And so the working group here is recommending fully funding the construction phase in 2018 for $564,344. The third ranked project that the working group rated was Louisville Metro's McNeely Lake Park Shared Use Path. Here, the project is proposing to construct a new shared use path that will connect the recently constructed path at Cedar Creek Road to the existing park path at the west side of the McNeely Lake Dam. And the working group recommends fully funding that project out in 2020, and the reason for that is because of the dollar amount, the $2 million. That's almost double what we receive in a year, and so we had to build up enough funds to push that project, which pushed that project out to 2020. And the fourth ranked project, according to the working group, was Louisville Metro's River Road multimodal improvements. Here, the plan is to reallocate the northernmost River Road lane traveling in the westbound direction, reallocate the existing barrier wall to expand the bicycle multi-use path, and it also adds street lighting. The project requested $900,000 in funds. The working group recommended fully funding the design and utilities in 2018 and partially funding the construction in 2019. The two projects that did not rank high enough to be recommended for funding was the Mount Washington Historic Memorial Multi-Use Trail, as well as Louisville Metro's 3rd Street Convention Center lighting project. With these recommendations, again, it would leave the region without any transportation alternatives funding until 2021, unless funding amounts change and estimates. Maybe the estimates were a little lower than the actual amount, maybe in 2019 or 2020. So that's the projects in a nutshell in both Indiana and Kentucky. As a reminder, the requested action on this item is to consider these recommendations and make recommendation to the TPC for approval at next week's meeting. So I'm happy to entertain any questions, comments, or motions.
Questions or comments for Nick? Seeing none, the action is that they recommend.
Yes, the TTC could take action to basically recommend the same projects that the working group recommended. So take the working group's recommendations and approve those today for TTC consideration next week. Or modify the recommendations from the working group. That's also a possibility.
Do we need to take them separately, separate decisions, Indiana and Kentucky, or do
We don't really have to. Typically we would, but
I make a motion that we recommend the TPC, the working group's priorities for
I'll
both Indiana and
second.
Kentucky.
Second, okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, thank you.
Thank you all.
The next item on the agenda is the downtown mobility plan. Larry?
yes, this is a study that we started a couple of years ago to try to make some sense of all the different things that were going on in the downtown area from a lot of different perspectives. We have bike lanes installed on a daily basis. We have transit routes. We have buildings that are being reconstructed, demolished, reconstructed again. There are a lot of things going on downtown. And pedestrian access is also critical in all of these areas. So we wanted to step back and look at all of those things, everyone's plans, and try to come up with a document that would help phase them and help them make sense with one another. So we had, we hired a consultant, HDR. The project was funded with KIPTA PL funds, 80%, and it was matched by the Downtown Partnership, who paid the match. And we are at the conclusion of that study, and we'd like to present it to you today and request that you accept the report as it is presented. This is Robert Frazier with HDR.
Thank you, Larry.
I was pleased to see that one of the projects that I'm about to talk about was on what you just approved, so this is good. And as Larry mentioned, yeah, this is a culmination of a substantial amount of work. And actually, before I go there, I'd like to, here we are, thank the people that have been involved. Parsons Brincroft and New West were our partners in this project, and then in the room, Jeff Schaefer, David Lee, Sean Dykes all contributed. Sean, formerly of Parsons Brincroft, is with HDR now, and so we collaborated a lot on this. And then there were a lot of there's a lot of staff time that went into this. A lot of staff time from Louisville Metro, and TARC, and KIPTA, and the Downtown Partnership, and Parking Authority. Many people involved. But this is a technical effort, so it's not, it's a technical, and I'll go into this a little more, it's a technical effort looking at all these projects as Larry just described. So I will let you know, we're gonna talk a little bit, I talked to this group, was last year, about this project. So I'd like to talk about the study area, the prior studies that went in, and then go through the 4 modes. That's really where I want to spend the majority of the time, is going through what we have come up with for these 4 different modes. But let's go ahead and set the context a little bit, looking at the downtown area, and that includes a lot of neighborhoods along the edges, as well as the core and the medical district. So that's the area that we are focused on. And the purpose of the project, right from the beginning, was to focus on a multimodal plan for mobility and safety for everyone, for all users. And economic development and enhanced livability were central to what we want to get out of these projects. We want to continue to see downtown grow and improve, and so that's a focus for an outcome of all this work. The modes that we looked at were all modes, everyone, all users, as we look at this downtown, but enhanced complete streets is kind of what we would call some of these projects. Downtown has many complete streets. We want to just continue to enhance the system. So a few key points to kind of, again, say what this is and what this isn't. This is a technical planning analysis. It's comprehensive. We looked at a lot of projects, over 100 different projects. It's based on data, analysis, and all the agency discussions, as I mentioned. Attempt is to coordinate things and kind of have one way of looking at things, and to undergird what happens as every agency moves forward with their projects. But it's not an approved local plan, it doesn't have public input, and it's not dictating what Louisville Metro, for example, will do. But it hopefully will undergird them. And I actually call the product is something of an encyclopedia of projects for downtown, where we touch on all these 100 projects and give information about all of them to undergird future work. Yeah, it doesn't set policies or priorities, but it does provide a solid technical basis for moving forward. All right, so there have been a lot of studies that have looked at downtown. And this is covers of a few, and I've listed some of them. We looked at these studies and pulled projects out of them. So, as recent as Move Louisville, but, some go way back into the 90s. So there's a lot of different, and before. So there's a lot of different things that we've looked at. A lot of projects have been on the books. So the goal here was to look at them all at one time. And then we pulled in a lot of information. So upper right, you see, we looked at TARC's system, where all their stops, where their routes, how many riders they have. Lower right, you see Metro's synchro model. So we looked at the traffic volumes and capacity down to the intersection level where it's appropriate. So we looked at crash data, a lot of information. And we looked at 12 different kind of evaluation criteria as we worked through how are we going to evaluate these over 100 different projects. So I will admit it was a little overwhelming at times. There's a lot here. But we think we've come up with some pretty good material. So I'm going to walk through the 4 modes and see, and show you kind of where we've ended up. So the first thing is pedestrians. So the pedestrian system, we looked at the issues of safety and connectivity, and then area improvements. Those are kind of the issues that rose to the surface for pedestrians. Upper right is some pedestrian crash hotspots in downtown, and lower right, 4 locations, 9th, 8th, 7th, and 6th, where there is not good pedestrian access, and that has been a project that has been on the books for a long time. People have been talking about it for a while. It just hasn't happened yet. And so part of the goal here is to set a context where some of these projects can maybe move forward if we potentially, as I'll show you in a minute, maybe integrate them into other projects that are moving forward. So this is the kind of the range of pedestrian projects that we looked at. And there are sidewalk projects. The lower left, I'll just kind of read the sidewalk projects, intersection and safety projects, connectivity projects, and corridor and area improvements. So if you look in the upper left, you see some circles there. P11 is that riverfront access project. And And then there's a project, sidewalk project would be P2 or P4 is actually a better example. It's I-64 Brook Street ramp, missing piece of sidewalk, no crosswalk there. And so what we did was we said, all right, let's look at those in the context of everything else. And so some of those projects, you see, and I'll use that same P4 right in the center of the figure there, turns into S20. Well, S20 is the roadway intersection project looking at the end of that ramp. And so that pedestrian project kind of rolls into a streets project. The riverfront access, P11, actually rolls into the River Road Extension project. And so we're trying to find which projects should really be part of other projects, and let's kind of group them properly. And then those projects that are advancing, like River Road Extension, we need to make sure that they include all the pieces that people have been talking about, and that we have one plan for going forward. So we spent a lot of time looking at that, and actually at the end of the day, we've got a table, and at the right side of the table, it's a little cross-index. This project relates to these other projects, so make sure that you look at these projects in this encyclopedia as you look at them. So there are other projects that kind of disappeared, so the P15, and this sets a little context, that's the improvements right around the community college, and those improvements are done. And we are places where we want to take some credit for success. So I'm going to show you another one where we want to take some credit for success in just a moment. First, I'll show you that these are the pedestrian-only projects, the ones that didn't get rolled into something else, and we rated them, and we put them in different phases, and we put project cost estimates to them, so that we could have some way of looking at them and how they would move forward. And I'll tell you this, there's a spreadsheet kind of behind this that I'd like to, and Larry and I were talking about this being basically a work product from all of this that allows for pretty easy working at this in the future, so no one has to start from scratch again, but they can use this tool. So I'd like to show a success story here. This is First and Brook. This is a high crash location for automobiles. It's a high crash location for pedestrians, which is what we're focused on right here. We identified it. We said there's something that needs to happen here. And in the left is a picture from 2014, and right is a more recent picture. Metro Louisville it's been restriped, so success. And actually, I don't know who actually put the paint down. Maybe KYTC, but somebody put the paint down, and so we want to take credit. And so we actually have this in the report to take credit where projects that are needed have happened, and we want to not just kind of skip over them. So we list them and we say they're complete. This is a project that is not complete. This is that riverfront access. This is at 7th Street on the right. And, we've got pictures of people trying to get to various places in the report that they can't get to very easily, and to show the need. And then this project is rolled into the extension project that I talked about. So that kind of gives you, that's generally how we went through each of those. So I won't go through some of that detail. Again, I'll focus more on the projects here. For bicycles, it was safety and connectivity were the two primary issues. And here in this lower right-hand map, you got the lines in red and the lines in blue, lines in green. They show kind of a need. Those are areas of need. Need for getting north-south through the core, east-west through the core, and east-west through the south part of downtown. So those were needs. So then for the bicycle mode, we actually looked at every single street to determine whether or not it made sense was there a way to accommodate reasonably bicycles on each of the streets. And we went west-east, north-to-south, and came up with this as a starting point. So this is the starting point of projects that we would examine. And you see some faded lines. We tracked everything that's already in place. And then we went ahead and said, okay, now let's roll those in. Which projects need to be rolled into other projects, and which projects are actually standalone bike projects. And there weren't too many standalone bike projects. They're more on the east side as you get into New Lou and things. But most of them are related to a street project. And so that was really important, that we make sure that everything is being done in conjunction with everything else that is going on those street projects. So you see Jefferson Street is a yellow highlight all the way across. There's actually three different projects on Jefferson Street in this report. And so bikes should be looked at with each of those three projects, but in the context of what's going to happen with everything else, with transit, with automobile traffic, with sidewalks and everything. So that is the bike map. These are the bike-only projects that we rated, and so I'll just Floyd Street shows up in a couple of places towards the top, so I want to use that as an example. 11th Street, actually I use number 2 there, is 11th Street. So north-south bike lanes on 11th Street, which would be in the new development that's going to happen in Russell, the choice neighborhood development, so it would go right through the middle of that. So that ended up being a standalone bicycle project that would be done in conjunction with a larger development project. But then you skip down to number 3, and then more importantly, number 6 is Floyd Street. And Floyd Street is kind of runs north-south. It's B18 if you see it. It's right at the north end, and Floyd Street actually presents an opportunity for doing a bike boulevard, an actual new kind of connection that would be friendly for bikes right to Waterfront Park. And so it's the lowest volume street in that whole area there, north-south. It's got the lowest traffic volumes, and so we identified that as, hey, here's a possible project that could provide a better bicycle connection without really having impacts to other modes. It actually could enhance that whole that corridor. So we were looking for those types of new projects. So there are some new projects that weren't in prior plans that have been rolled into this. So it's not all just old stuff. We tried to look forward and put in new ideas. And this actually kind of takes the Metro's Neighborway projects and bumps it up one more level to say maybe we can do something a little more than some of the neighborways in this particular 2-block section. All right, so then, I guess I'm going to stop. I want to make sure that I meant to do this at the beginning later, but if there are any questions, now's probably a good pause point to just ask, are there any questions that anyone has at this point? You want to make sure everybody's awake. I know some of this could be, but is this good? All right, any more questions? I'll carry on, but if there are, please, from this point forward, just stop me if there are any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so the transit mode, transit is more complex than the others in some ways. I mean, the others are complex, but the transit has a number of different kind of inputs and things that are going on. So the upper right-hand figure here shows you the coverage. We have great coverage downtown with our bus system. All the little dots are stops. There are a lot of stops. So great coverage and a lot of stops is great in some ways, but it leads to sometimes some inefficiencies because the bus may be stopping much more frequently. And so there's a trade-off there on the efficiency and then coverage continuum. Then on the lower right shows where we've got the most intense service. The red areas are where there's the most transit service in the downtown core. And then those blue circles are kind of example transfer locations. We did a few examples. If I want to go from here to here within the region, where do I transfer? And sometimes 1 or 2 places come up, and there really isn't always one good place to transfer. And in fact, I know from experience, there isn't always one good place to catch the bus. I have actually stood out there and I want to catch the next bus. I'm headed here, and I go to one spot and I missed it, and the other spot's too many blocks away, and so there's complexities to the system that we thought through, and looking at all this information helped us get at some of those. Then this is a heat map that shows where the ridership is most intense, and that's the kind of the heat map lines, and then the more rectangular lines, that's employment. So where is employment relative to ridership? And if you look at the medical district, it's not as dark on the ridership as we would like. Part of that goes back to it's not as dark on the service as we would like. And so there's various things that we kind of that came to the front as we looked at this. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. So let me catch back up here. All right, another thing is transfers. The dark bars on the right are the percent of people that transfer always on different routes. Then the next one over, the darker blue, is sometimes. There was a lot of transferring that happens in TARC's system. And so that whole transfer issue that I was talking about before is not just theoretical. It's, for a lot of people, it's real. How do I transfer? How do I transfer efficiently? And then what do the riders, the users, the dark lines are those that are recent users. What do they actually want? And they really want faster, more direct service, and they want amenities, shelters and benches. And then the next one is actually coordinated transfers. So those are things that people want. So we looked at that information as well. And we came up with what are the range of projects we should be looking at downtown for transit. Came up with a map. And I'll just tell you the types of projects were bus-only lanes and variations on that theme. Enhanced service, route revisions, where we actually changed the route, and then transfer zones, so transit transfer zones. So let me then move on. So I'll give a couple examples. The circles that you see are potential transfer locations. If we were to try to highlight certain areas to allow people to transfer more easily, those would be key locations where we would want to do that, where a lot of routes could go through those points, and it's close to a place that people want to go. And then the blue lines are potential new bus routes, bus-only lanes or something similar. And you'll see that some of those are going to get rolled into other projects because it's complicated. There's trade-offs with all of these things. And then the last thing, the green would be enhanced service. So that would be like what's happening with Dixie Highway and coming right into downtown is the BRT service. So that's enhanced bus service. Okay. So some of those projects I just kind of flip back and forth. You can see, so, there we go. Some of those projects kind of changed to the yellow street projects again, because they needed to be part of projects that are bigger and all-encompassing. And so that happened with Jefferson Street, and that happened with Broadway, for example, and then up on Market as well. So and then these projects are also phased. So that's, again, there's a lot of material here. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but I'm going to use this one as an example to show the phasing. So here we're phasing in, hey, we ought to look at these transfer nodes in a phase one, near term. We ought to look at the, what I'm going to call the transit emphasis zones, which are the kind of the big green bands. Those actually don't happen, those happen in the midterm. So that would be route changes to actually put more buses in certain zones. So Market and Jefferson, Muhammad Ali and Chestnut and Broadway, and not necessarily running buses in the middle. So try to focus our attention on key corridors. So those are the concepts, and that's the phasing. Then the other projects that got pushed out further to future phases. I'll give you a couple of, so this is the rating of the transit-only projects. Broadway, BRT ended up being top of the list. Transit emphasis zones also rerouting the circulator that is already kind of rerouted, the old 4th Street circulator that's now the 3rd and 5th Street circulator due to construction. It's tough to make that one work. So doing something with that rose to the top, and doing something on 5th Street. If you spent much time on 5th Street, kind of happy, you know, it's a busy corridor for buses, and so there's some improvements that could be made there. So I'll give you three snapshots. This is a route map showing the proposed new routes in the downtown area, and we've got details for each one. This is a concept that came out of this that, for those of you who are familiar with kind of tactical urbanism, the idea of, hey, if we were to do a bus-only lane, we could actually do a test of that in the nearer term if we wanted, because of the construction. There are only 3 lanes on Jefferson right now as it goes by the convention center. And so one of the concepts is for looking at Jefferson Street is what do we do with that street? And I'll show you a picture of one of the long-term concepts in a minute, but there's potential for doing something nearer term. And then this is the transit transfer zone, kind of emphasizing these stops and putting stops on the same corner so people don't have to walk across the street to get from bus A to bus B. And so really then emphasizing those, potentially giving, you can see a little green, pushing the curbs out a little bit at key locations where we can do it without impacting traffic very much, and allow people to have a little more space for those key bus stops or stations. Okay, so question.
There's a few slides back, you listed the areas of improvement that people felt that had the pink and the black. Can I see that again?
Absolutely. Thank you for a question.
That's the one right there.
I need to hear another voice.
Thank you. Okay, I got it.
All right. Okay, so the last section here is streets. And so streets is really, it's kind of a big, it includes there's a lot going on every street. And so there are a lot of projects that are kind of in this streets category, some of which kind of catch up other projects that are written about individually. They roll up, and actually in the report it will say, for this bike project, it'll give a little discussion, and they'll say, go see this other project. And so these are all the streets projects that we looked at, and they include two-way conversions, they include lane reductions, they include complete streets enhancements, And they include connectivity projects, so things where we need new connections. So actually, I'll just two-way conversions. A lot of those you see over in New Loop, for example, where there's proposals to change one-way streets to two-way streets. Lane reductions. Jefferson Street is an example. River Road has been talked about. So these are, again, this is the all-encompassing all projects, not necessarily saying that these are all going to happen. We had to look at everything. This is the everything. Complete streets enhancements, Market and Jefferson. Connectivity projects, River Road is a prime example. Intersection improvements, Brook Street, Ramp, or Story and Main, those are prime examples. And then kind of area improvements, so speed limits. What is the downtown speed limit? Set to 25 universally for all streets. That would be, that would be for an area improvement. All right, so then as we move forward, this is how the projects got phased in, and you'll see some projects, go back, a few projects disappear, some get rolled into other things, and so this is where we end up. And then the near-term projects are projects, some of which are going on right now. 3rd Street being converted, 7th and 8th Streets, which I believe is underway, River Road Extension, projects that are in development right now, and then high priority projects such as Broadway and the rest of Jefferson Street. So those are how things kind of broke out in terms of phasing. And then there's clearly midterm and then long-term projects. The long-term projects, some of those are projects that they're either complex or they have potential for impacts that really we don't fully have documented at this time, and so they're kind of pushed out further. So we rated the streets projects. Just to talk about the first couple there at the top, Broadway complete streets, Jefferson Street complete streets, Market Street complete streets, River Road extension, 25-mile-an-hour speed limit that I talked about, Jefferson Street two-way. So there's a number of projects at the top, put costs to them, cross-references I mentioned, and what phases they come in. There's a lot of projects. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. This is Jefferson Street from Brook on out to Baxter Chestnut, and then the little piece of kind of Baxter Chestnut that's coming down from Story in Maine, and converting those to two-way. And this is really all about circulation. This is allowing, as the Market Street project is completed, about allowing better circulation in this area and allowing traffic to get down to Jefferson Street and allowing traffic to use Jefferson Street in both directions to allow a better dispersion of traffic through this area. And so there's pieces of those projects, and those were, so one project here, this is in Move Louisville. This other project wasn't really in Move Louisville, the Jefferson Street, but it's important for circulation. We actually look at the traffic volumes, which we did, that are flowing on Main, on Market, on Jefferson, and on down. So having the ability to distribute the traffic well. Then this is looking at Jefferson Street. One of the projects that is in here is complete streets for Jefferson Street. And we looked at taking one of the lanes and some of the parking and putting a bus only lane, and a bike lane in one direction, but leaving it one way. So that there's a lot of trade-offs as opposed to going two-way. Can we use that pavement a little bit differently to accommodate other modes? And so that's one of the projects that's discussed in detail in the report. And then the River Road Extension project, again, connection, circulation. In the report, we clearly bring in prior work that's been done, try to get it in one spot. It's the encyclopedia mentality there, trying to keep everything in one spot so you can look at these projects and then see what the history is with each of them. So that is a really, I don't know if it's fast enough, Larry, but that was pretty quick run through.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
With the evaluation of switching one-way to two-way streets, did you all look at like the uses that are in those corridors with parking garages and that sort of thing? Like how vehicles would make a left turn out of a parking garage if the streets were converted to two-way?
We didn't solve all those issues, but yes, that is part of, and we, for example, on 3rd Street, there's challenges in there, so it's clearly part of what needs to happen. This is kind of, at the planning level, we say, hey, these are the issues. we
Yep.
think this is feasible, but you're gonna have to address X, Y, Z.
Mhm.
And then the next phase of each individual project is gonna have to go and address X and Y and Z.
Yeah.
But that is a prime issue.
It's pretty cautionary on the one-way to two-way conversions. You have to look pretty hard at the impacts, just like that. Freight, we looked at freight impacts, particularly downtown, on what would happen if you convert one-way to two-way and you stop delivery truck in the morning. You know, how
Do
that
you
can-
also look at police and fire response time, does it change that? I'm going from, because I worked with the police for years. It
It's,
was all one way, then it reversed to
that can be
two
debated.
way, so.
That can be debated all day long. Because
Yeah,
there's a
right.
discussion between, okay, you've got extra capacity on the one-way street,
Right.
but you save time if you go to two-way,
Mhm.
you'll be able to get there faster from the other direction. That it's,
How it works out either way.
Yeah, and there are definitely, like I was over in Nulu there, and there's a lot of research to back this up, that there can be benefits to the two-way from a system standpoint. But then there's other places where if you convert a street to two-way, you actually can tie it up in ways that you might not have expected. So there's definitely these trade-offs.
So did you use the downtown synchro model to evaluate the trade-offs? Is that within the scope of the study?
Those are two different questions. The answer to the first question is yes. At a planning level, we use the synchro model. Well, then so we did that. Yes.
Did it appear that it would be promising to convert those streets, or did it seem like there would be a lot of issues?
It depends on which street we're talking about. So again, in certain areas, it was clear that we could demonstrate, yes, this will work. And then there were other areas where it was not clear that it would work. And as you start to convert multiple cross streets, it began to get more and more complicated. And so it wasn't in our scope to really take that all the way to a final conclusion. It was kind of more a high-level feasibility and running some tests. And so we identified, as Larry said, we identified where we thought there was promise and where we were concerned about possible impacts.
this was not a complete engineering analysis of any of these options. One of the things that we hope to come from this is, yes, we think we want to convert it to two-way. Step back and look at, okay, are you going to put transit on it? Do you have freight issues, bike and ped on it? Will all that fit? And we did a little bit of that. We looked at relative widths of some of these roadways and the capability of doing all those things. Some of the answers are absolutely not. You can't squeeze all that into a 36-foot roadway. But hopefully we've got enough tools now, it's an encyclopedia, that Louisville Metro can take this and look at all of those holistically and say, do we want all of these things in this corridor, or is there another way?
And sometimes the trade-off has to do with parking. So that we looked at each of the components. So I mentioned parking. That was a key part of what we looked at.
It's a study, a copy available somewhere, or?
It will be as soon as we publish it.
Okay. So,
Very soon. And it will be on our website as well, but Metro will get several copies.
What is the action verb?
To accept the report,
Oh, just accept.
since we did pay for most of it, formally accept it as presented.
Any additional questions on this? As just mentioned, action is requested to accept the report. Can I have a motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Intelligent Transportation Systems Architecture presentation. Andy Rush from KIPTA.
All right. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we finally wrapped up. That is our KIPTA regional ITS architecture. We just received these reports just recently, and Ashley's passing a few copies around. Please do just pass those around, take a look at them while I'm speaking. You also find, and I think what should have been in the agenda packet was an executive summary, something like this. It kind of is a real brief overview of what I'm getting ready to describe right now. Okay, what is ITS? There's a definition of ITS. I don't know if that's everybody's definition of ITS, but ITS are projects and systems that use electronic technologies and communications to improve safety and efficiency of surface transportation. So that's a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of types of projects, a whole bunch of styles of projects are ITS. I think the most visible one that probably most of us see most regularly, perhaps, are these variable message signs, dynamic message signs that we see on the interstates around the region. On this side of the river, they're Trimark, and there's one, it looks like it's near the new bridge, so that's a Trimark sign. Trimark is certainly the main ITS agency in this region. I think that's safe to say. That's what it seems like. However, as I'll speak to in a minute, there are a lot of stakeholders in this ITS architecture and ITS work in them. What's a regional ITS architecture? That's a really good question, and I think it also means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But it's really just our roadmap that we will use at KIPTA as an agency, and the stakeholders in this room and stakeholders outside this room, but in this region, will use to integrate these systems for the next 20 years or so. It's definitely more than a list of projects. I want to make that point very clear. This is not the regional long-range transportation plan for ITS projects. It's more than that, but it also is that too. We're also updating ours because the existing one was developed in 2004. It's getting kind of old. At that time, that was one of the first ones, as I recall, nationwide. And so 13 years old, these technologies that are discussed in an architecture, these ITS programs more generally, are emerging, evolving technologies. And so a 13-year-old ITS architecture is very old. So that's why we've updated that. You never want to underestimate this. We're updating our ITS architecture, and we have an regional ITS architecture because we're required to have an ITS architecture. Okay? So it meets the federal requirements, and they define it something to the extent of it's a regional framework for ensuring institutional agreement and technical integration for implementation of ITS projects. That's how it's perhaps defined by the feds.
So it's a good thing, not just a requirement.
That's right. It keeps us legal. It keeps us legal. So this process has been going on for more or less a year. We got our consultant under contract, and the consultant that put together the study for us is Consensus Systems Technologies. And I can't say enough good things about them. They were really good. These folks are experts on this. They're an out-of-state firm, and I think we were a bit hesitant at first, but what we saw, what they brought to the table, they've done dozens of these nationwide, so we really had the best working on this. So as you can see here, we got them under contract last year. Kickoff meeting, which several of y'all probably were at, but most of y'all were at many more of you were at the stakeholder workshop. That was really where, I don't know about I think there were probably maybe a dozen people in this room that were there. I know I learned a lot that day, and I hope you all did too, and they really drove home what this is, what it can be, and how it's supposed to work, and we really got people and agencies talking at that meeting, and hopefully that's just the start of some good things to come after the adoption of this report, and looking forward to the next 5, 10, however many years. The final report was submitted. We just got the copies that are being passed around just within the past week or so. I think it has a May date on it, but we really just got it just this week. What does our ITS architecture look like? That's a good question, right? It looks like three different things, 3 different flavors, if you will. We've got an executive summary. That's the thing that Miss Emily Lou's holding right there. It has a blue kind of header on it. And that's it in a nutshell. And frankly, for a lot of people in this room and for a lot of people's knowledge, that's probably all you need to know about regional ITS architecture. So we do have that. We've got a final report. That's the thing in the blue binder. And then we have a project website, and I'll show a little bit about these things. Executive summary is right there. That's it in a nutshell. Final report. This is, it's not as long as our last one, but if you got to be really interested and want to read the whole report. But it has everything that one, we're required to have. Secondarily, it has everything that the stakeholders brought to the table, and it does a really good job of describing it far more thoroughly than the executive summary ever could. This is what most of us will continue to use going forward. This is the project website. And this is a really important thing that we ask for as part of our update. And I don't envision virtually anybody using that final report very often, but turning to this website here. Certainly have a link to this website very soon on our website. It's actually housed by Consistec, and they developed the website. And what this website does, it really has, if our old architecture was an inch thick, this limits our narrative, and everything that we need to know is in here. It describes the stakeholders, the projects, the service packages, and I'll tell you what some of these things mean in a minute, show you what they mean in a minute. But going forward, this is the site that we're going to use as staff, I promise you that, and what I hope you all will use too. So here's all the other things that are in both the report and on the website. Some of these things are pretty far deep in the weeds. The standards, for instance, that's how communications happen between different types of technology and pieces and components of infrastructure. Looking at the list, we've got the interfaces and information exchange, again, something kind of similar to that. And I'll go into depth in a couple of these other things here in a second. Starting with the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? These are our major stakeholders: NDOT, KYTC, Metro, TARC, and Trimark. These are the folks that are probably most likely to implement ITS projects. And that's an example, or that's a picture right there of the brand new Trimark, what we call it, Ricky, Traffic Management Center? Traffic Operations Center. If you look real carefully, I think you can see Ricky's head over the computer, hard at work. If you ever get a chance, go check that place out. It's really cool, it's really up to date. That back wall, correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, that it represents all of the monitoring for the Ohio River Bridges project, or more specifically to the tunnels, right?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the East End.
Yeah, and so because of the East End Tunnel, that's a 24/7 operation right now. And so what they used to have is much smaller. It was much, that room right there is probably about as big as this room or so, and the old room was more or less a closet. It really was. It was a small conference room or a closet. So that's not even showing the whole room right there. So it's really cool. If you ever get a chance, if you ever have an opportunity, and Ricky will let you in, go check that place out. But those are not the only stakeholders. We've got numerous other stakeholders, and this is just a bridge list. KIPTA, of course, is Federal Highways. All the local governments are too. And I'll speak a little bit more about this in a minute how small cities, counties, etc. Are a part of this as well, even if they're not direct implementers, I guess you could say, of a major ITS project. Riverlink, how the tolls are going to be administered, paid for, captured, that sort of thing is part of this too. Law enforcement and emergency services certainly are a big part of this. Emergency service, especially as it relates to like a dispatch function. The travelers that receive the information from the dynamic message signs, from their apps, from all different media, and a whole bunch of other stakeholders. Those are the stakeholders. That was one component. Kind of the guts of an ITS architecture are these things called service packages. Okay, and I put this example in here because I think it kind of shows the service packages in a nutshell. The service package, it defines how these information flow back and forth from one agency, one place, from things like the media, from all different, from the signs. Okay, so let me describe this. So this service package is called Traffic Information Dissemination, and this is specifically related to Trimark. Okay, so up here in the top right, so Trimark's right in the middle. Here in the top right, that represents the data that's out there on the road. That's the data that comes in from their videos, from the CCTVs,
So that's the flow, that's this line right here. So the flow comes into Trimark, some of the flow goes back out of Trimark to the signs and whatnot. Trimark takes that information, road network conditions and traffic images, that goes a few different places, included they put it on their website, some other places. It gets to MetroSafe, and it can go to the media as well, okay? And so you see those are all the ones I've mentioned so far are existing flows. That's what Trimark can does do now. Up there in the top represents an example of a planned and future flow. And those are those flows or information data exchanges that might not happen quite yet, but is planned to happen in the future. So this is just one of probably, I don't know how many are in there, probably several dozen, 50 service packages. And another thing to mention here is that this thing representing the service package for traffic information dissemination, this is just the Trimark version of it, okay? So there's also, in ITS regional architecture, there's an NDOT version. And so NDOT does things slightly differently, and so it defines and describes how those communications happen with NDOT system. Same for KYT. Several times you will find 4 of these. You'll find the Trimark, you'll find the NDOT, you'll find a Louisville Metro version, and then you'll find the local governments one. So sometimes it's kind of scaled. So some of the smaller communities don't have all of these things, but they're certainly beneficiaries of things at the regional level. But several times there will be service packages that are about 3 or 4 of the same service package representing how they work slightly differently. Okay, and I mentioned this wasn't a long-range plan for ITS projects, and it's not. But there is a project implementation plan in there. And this is where, it's kind of the fun part of it, perhaps. This is where all the projects are described. Many of the projects are described. Hopefully all the projects are described. They're defined. Some are short-term, some are long-term. Some of them are represent technology that's not fully refined yet. For example, like connected vehicles, something like that. We're not ready for that yet, but we'll be in the next 20 years. And another thing I want to emphasize here is the difference between generic and specific projects in the project implementation plan. Both are in there, and for example, you'll find a project in there that's Trimark expansion on I-265, because that's a project that's more kind of in the works right now. So that's an example of a specific project. Trimark plans to expand cameras and other sensors on I-265. What you also find in there, and what is very important to have in there, again, getting back to keeping this legal side of this thing, are the generic projects that say Trimark system expansion. Don't know exactly where cameras will be 10 years from now, but Trimark will plan to expand those. Other examples of projects include lots of TARC projects. There's a ton of TARC projects in there. The way smart cards that people will use in the future to pay their fares when they board the bus. The real-time app that they've got out now. That's a good example of it. The Dixie Highway BRT system, the signal preemption. That's an example of an ITS project that's in here. Various traffic signal improvements. Can't emphasize enough how important those are for Louisville Metro and the region at large. Be able to communicate with your signals a little bit better. And then again, I mentioned, so again, looking probably furthest out, a lot of these connected vehicle applications, NDOT has some ideas, Louisville Metro has some ideas of how that infrastructure can and might work with connected vehicles as that comes online very soon. How are we going to use our ITS architecture? It's up for debate and for us to define a little bit going forward, but it's certainly going to supplement our planning process. The concepts, the projects in here will certainly be a part of KIPTA's long-range plan in the future. Another thing to emphasize is that not all of the projects that are ITS projects are going to find their way into our long-range plan in TIP. A lot of that has to do with kind of the law enforcement agency side, the emergency services, the dispatch function. A lot of those are not going to be directly federal transportation projects, but they're going to be projects that influence ITS. And this ITS regional architecture, it has It can help assist in ITS project definition, and what you see there is I think they call it a V diagram. V diagrams are used in systems engineering analysis. And I'm no expert on systems engineering analysis, but nonetheless, this architecture gets us a long way toward when a major project is defined in the future, is created in the future. We're most of the way there on the required systems engineering analysis by having a good, new, modern ITS architecture. I think this is my last slide here, but one of the other things we emphasize is we need to do a better job here at KIPTA of maintaining our ITS architecture. As I just mentioned, our old one, or our current one, I guess, for perhaps a few more weeks, is the one that was generated in 2004. And so we really asked Consistech to give us some good ideas, and they have, of how we can keep it up to date, how we can keep it maintained, how we can avoid putting a document on the shelf and on our website that doesn't get used, that people don't recognize as there, and that we can really use and take advantage of what's in there. And so some of these questions aren't to be answered today, but there's food for thought perhaps. But one of the things that I think is highly likely is that at some point next year or so, I mean, we don't need to maintain it, we don't need to update it right now, we got a fresh one right now. But a working group, perhaps of this committee right here, to look into what needs to be changed, what's a minor change, what's a major change, and then eventually when we need a new one, when we need to say, hey, this one that we got in 2017, that's old, we need a new one. So food for thought right there. And there's a lot of narrative in the report about how this can happen.
And as of right now, a rough guideline from Federal Highways is 10 years.
Yeah, and that feels about right. I mean, that's not necessarily a requirement as we understand it, that it must be updated in 10 years, but 10 years, so somebody, me or somebody will be here in 10 years from now talking about a brand new one, but we look for a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue before now and 10 years from now to better utilize the new ITS architecture. I really do believe this is a big time improvement in this department. There's the website again. That's the project level website. Again, I encourage you to check that out. If we had a lot of time, I'd be happy to show you how that works, and be sure to check that out at some point. If there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. And I am asking for this committee's recommendation for the TTC approval here next week. Week after next. Yeah.
Could you go back to talking about the service packages?
Yeah.
I think you talked about them. I quickly was on the website already, so already up there, and noticed that, for instance, with APCD, there was a service package and some dotted lines, plans, not mentioned in the write-up of the report. So there's obviously a lot more information at the website. So I'm just wondering, one, if you can talk about what maybe is at the website that's not part
it's
of
a real good question. Thank you.
and then have some of those dotted lines, if there's a plan for implementing those, or if they're just good ideas that are out there.
Some of all that.
Okay.
So
some of those dotted lines were yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
From your direction.
So a big part of the way this update process happened was through Consistech and myself and KIPTA and Larry's and all Lori, Kelsey's coordination, meeting with the stakeholders, especially the key stakeholders, saying, hey, let's take an inventory of what you've got now. Tell us what you've got now, especially the consultants saying, hey, what do you have now? And TARC and Metro, and KYTC, Trimark, and DOT, they all described it. And that was part of the discussion. The next part of the discussion, what do you want to do? What do you see yourselves doing, both in the short term and the long term? And so a lot of the dashed lines come from just that, from programs, from projects that agencies see on the horizon. Okay, and so I don't know exactly about the ABCD ones, but on the website, it's real easy to use. Let me just kind of show. One of the tabs up here is stakeholders. It's hard to see right there, but nonetheless, and I don't have an internet connection to it. But you can get on there and do stakeholders and go to LMA-PCD, and it will describe everything that connects to APCD. So on the service package front, on the you can just like you can look at APCD, you can look at travelers, you can look at Trimark, you can look at all of the people, all the agencies, and all of the users. And so again, that's what makes this a key improvement, or one of the main reasons that this is a key improvement over old one. Otherwise, our old one, you had to look up in a 230, 300 page document, find the service package, and what does all this mean? This also helps you out on what does it all mean. Certainly makes it easier to look up, and certainly describes what it means much better than our existing.
And you can find it so many different ways. You can find it by owner, you can find it by the improvement type. There are a lot of different ways to get to that particular service package. And one thing about this document and the way we went about it, it's not required to be fiscally constrained, and it's not really got a time frame on it. So all of the stakeholders were asked to look into the future with really not holding back.
No, really.
So some of those dotted lines are those things.
Those are two good points to know.
Those are key.
Plenty of time. Any other questions for Andy? Thank you. Action is requested to recommend this report for approval at TPC. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'd like to make a motion.
I have a first, I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 8 on the agenda is the shift project selection. Larry?
This has been ongoing for several months now, and you've helped us decide how we're going to go through this process. We brought to you a couple of months ago a list of projects that we were going to sponsor, quote unquote sponsor, in the shift process. And what that means is not the person who is building the project in that sense of sponsorship, but sponsorship in the sense that the MPO thought these were important projects. So we put that list together. We sent that to the Transportation Cabinet. The district office put together a similar list of their projects. So together we have a list of about 100 projects that we have to consider, because the next step in this process is this group will look at that list of about 100 projects and decide which ones are important enough as a region to give extra. They were extra points at one point. They're still 15 extra points. They're calling it a bump. What it means is if we have the opportunity to take 25% of those projects of that list and give them a little extra incentive to look at those projects. We have to wait until the Transportation Cabinet, first of all, looks at all of those lists of projects statewide. They're going to look at the projects that are on the National Highway System, and they're going to select a certain number of those projects statewide. Some of the projects that are on our list of 100 may come off and will be funded in the next 6-year plan without our involvement. So once that occurs, the projects that will be remaining on that list, we are charged with coming up with 25% of those projects and giving that boost to those projects. What we'd like to do at this point, because we don't have that list yet, we're supposed to have it by the end of next week, maybe?
I can't remember the exact date. but
22nd,
it's
something like that. So between now and the July TTCC meeting, we would like to put together a working group to look at what we've done. Staff has gone through and evaluated all these projects based on our new Connecting Kentuckiana project evaluation process that we've put together that you have approved in the past. We've scored all those projects based on that, and we based those on project descriptions. We based it on what we have in our database, all the information that we had available. So we've got scores on those projects. It's different than the scores that the Transportation Cabinet has. So what we'd like to do is put together a working group to make a recommendation. Once we know what that 25%, how many projects that's going to be, make a recommendation to the TPC to boost that list of projects and then send that on to the Transportation Cabinet for their process. So what I'd like to do today is have some volunteers for a working group. 4 to 6 people would be most efficient, I think, if that many of you are interested.
Okay, so I need
Is
4.
that interest or question?
Interest first, then question.
Alrighty, so Emily, so we need 4, you're looking for 4 to 6?
4 would be great.
Larry, District 5 would like to have one, if we can.
Okay, so Representative.
So are you volunteering Tom since he's not here?
I'm volunteer.
So
Keenan?
Keenan Stratman,
you're with
St. Matthews.
Okay. Yes. Jim and Matt.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank you. And as soon as we get that list, I will contact all of you and we will get together and formulate our plan of attack.
My question is, what's the timeline for get together? I mean, the summertime.
Oh, it will be before the
July
second week in
meeting.
July. Mhm.
And it's
So
just
will be some.
one meeting?
Hopefully we can do it in one meeting because you have approved the process that would allow us to score all the projects. We've scored them all, so we'll have that available. There's a question.
There's a question.
Was somebody from Metro nominated for that work group?
Emily.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other questions in regards to this? You don't need any other action, do you?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Then last thing is we have a bylaws revision that has to be taken care of.
Yes, with all of our new members, we have to formally modify the TTCC bylaws. That includes a list of the new members. So we have City of Shepherdsville, City of Mount Washington, City of St. Matthews. We also have the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet Office of Transportation Delivery. Those are our 4 new voting members. Advisory membership, we have added the Kentucky Trucking Association and the Indiana Motor Transport Association, freight concerns in both states. They will be advisory members. We also added, I'm sorry, Richard, you're not on the list. We added Trimark also as an advisory member. So we're gonna make him sit at the table next time. And the bylaws, the changes in the bylaws simply reflect that list of the new members.
Do we need action?
Yes.
To modify?
Action to modify the bylaws.
Okay.
And I sent that out separately from the meeting packet. And if you don't have a list, I just went through the new members.
Okay. So I need a motion to add the communities of St. Matthews, Shepherdsville, Mount Washington as full member?
And the KYTC Office of Transportation Delivery.
Okay.
As voting members.
As voting members, and then to add as advisory members, the trucking groups from,
The Indiana
Sorry.
Motor Transport Association and Kentucky Trucking Association.
and Trimark.
And Trimark.
Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to add those members to the TTCC.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Is there any other business that needs to be taken care of today? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Jim? Matt, okay. That'll work. Thank you.